Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Macaw Podcast Universe. This is the podcast where we do film franchises, and we exist to prove people wrong when they say that sequels are never better than the originals. Isn't that so, Jordan Macaw?
Uh-huh.
And introduce me.
Yes, Mike Macaw.
Thank you very much. So today we are smack dab in the middle of our Middle Earth series, and we are chewing off the second half of the series, starting with The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey. Now, folks, we've said a lot of stuff about this movie in the past, and I want to tell you we truly, truly did, at least you can speak for yourself.
Yeah, don't speak for me.
But I came into this, and before we pressed rent on iTunes and before we pressed play, I said, Jordan, we have to take this on and give it its day in court, basically. We can't just take all of our preconceived notions from when we saw it before. We got to give it its due. So I went in as fresh as I could. Do you want to speak to anything you said?
I think I did too, but it did not last very long.
Okay. Wow, you're kind of giving away your thoughts and opinions pretty early, Jordan.
Sorry.
And if you are just joining us now, this is a Patreon picked series, which is very cool. We reached a goal, and then the patrons got to choose a series. So if you want to be a part of any future series planning, you need to go to www.patreon.com/MicahMacaw, and you can sign up for as little as $3 to be able to participate in that, and also get our MPU The Sequel podcast, where we do movies that only have 2 sequels, and this month it's Finding Nemo. Next month it's Finding Dory. So let's jump into the movie.
Okay.
Do you want to hit anything first?
Well, when did you first see it?
Oh, yes, I forgot. I remember you being involved in this.
Really?
You went...
I went
tell
to the
yours
midnight,
first.
Well, I went to the midnight premiere. It was cold. And then... very excited, read the book. I reread The Hobbit right before the movie because I wanted it to be as fresh as possible in my mind. And so get in the theater. I already heard about the frame rate thing and how people were puking.
Did you have any did you walking into the theater as it came out in 2012? Did you have any thought on what that would mean?
What?
The high frame rate?
Probably. I mean, I know that I had read an article about it, but my biggest takeaway was that it was the motion of it was so a certain way that it was making people sick.
Yeah.
But I was a long time ago, so I don't totally remember. And then I remember in the theater, movies pretty much in the beginning, I remember seeing Frodo being so excited, and immediately after that thinking, why do I do midnight premieres? I am so tired right now.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying not to sleep the whole movie. Dark Knight Rises was pretty much the same thing. Kind of by the end, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired.
I know, and
I've only done a few too, and I think I've only done a few because maybe this was my last one. Because it's like, what is the point? It's not even like waiting in line. Sure, it's kind of fun, but it was also this movie came out in the winter time. Yeah, I was cold.
I remember, with midnight premieres, I think the first one I saw was Spider-Man 3, and I loved it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing. Walked out of the theater, freaking cool. Saw it again in theaters, loved it. It was only later, and I heard everyone else saying it was bad, that I was like, oh, I guess I'm not supposed to like this movie. Recently rewatched it. It's actually not that bad of a movie. It has some serious issues, but it's not that bad. That's just a side note. We'll get to that someday. But I just remember, midnights were fun when you were going with friends, and I remember going to Dark Knight Rises and stuff. But then what really did it like a nail in the coffin for me was Force Awakens, because...
I don't remember that being a midnight showing. That was 9...
I know.
Okay.
Because I remember, before they did, true midnight showings, you could not see it before midnight. And then... a few years ago, they started doing the day before showings.
Yeah.
And then they started doing the day before showings. And we saw Force Awakens at 9, you
Something
said?
like that.
And it was just funny because there were people waiting in line for the 12 a.m. And we were like, oh,
yeah.
Can we, are you in line for the 7 or the 9, whichever one we were at? And they're like, oh, no, we're waiting. We want to see it on the day it comes out. And we're like, oh, okay. That's
I'm gonna see it 3 hours earlier.
yeah. We're gonna see it before you and go to bed before the movie even starts for you. But cool, I guess.
Yeah. When we do Spider-Man,
Yeah,
for the Patreon, it's got to be the Amazing Spider-Man.
that's exactly what I was thinking.
I just thought about that. I feel like that is perfectly. That all happened for our podcast.
Yeah.
That's too perfect.
Which means I was kind of thinking maybe we should do it this winter, but with the slate we have, we wouldn't be able to do it. So maybe we'll have to wait on Spider-Man then.
Okay.
Bummer. Okay, so you saw the movie, and I
So
remember.
why do you remember me?
Well, I just remember, I think I had tickets for the next day. Like the day it came out. And you and Veronica went to Holy Joe's, which I was working at that Friday. And you came in, and I was like, oh my gosh, how was the movie? How was the movie? Tell me. And you were, I remember, maybe I'm misremembering,
what did I say?
but I just remember you just being kind of like, yeah, no, it was good. I was just so tired.
Oh, I
was
mean,
just,
that sounds like exactly what I just described.
yeah, and then I was like, oh, but I mean, it was like, I mean, was it everything, we've been waiting for this movie for 10 years. Is it like up to that part? And you're like, yeah, I think so. There's cool stuff with Gollum. That part was really cool. And so I was like, oh, weird. And
Pretty accurate.
Yeah, then I saw
accurate.
the movie, and I had recently read the book, reread the book, because this was the first movie I saw after having read a book on it.
Okay.
And so I was like, I had some qualms with it, particularly Azog, the pale orc, and then just some of the stuff they added, and then some of the stuff they detracted. I was confused. I didn't understand why they did those decisions.
And at this time, we would have known that there were going to be 3 movies.
I
by this
believe
point.
so. I'm
That'd be
not
kinda
sure. I have
crazy.
notes on it. So
Okay.
But yeah, and again, for the listener, with adaptions, we like them to be different, but we will be getting into some of the things that I think are odd about this adaptation, not necessarily like totally bad, although I think they did make some bad choices, because I've been rereading Two Towers, and it's actually quite a bit different than the movie. But it does capture the spirit, and I think that's where this movie fails.
You know the other book I reread specifically for the movie that was coming out?
What?
The Great Gatsby.
Oh.
And yeah, I hated that movie
Yeah.
so much.
I'm wondering if I'm going to shoot myself in the foot for reading Dune before the movie.
No.
Although I didn't...
I don't know. That's a beast.
Yeah, it's a different kind of book. So...
And because it's so, if it was like, let's say you split the book up into 3 parts, I wonder if psychologically that would be different
Yeah.
than a giant, massive thing that's impossible for you to remember everything that you read.
Right,
or
right.
like /care.
Right, if I had read like
That
half,
happened.
like right before November. Although, who knows when that movie's actually going to come out.
Yeah.
But, okay. So we got that covered?
Sure.
Okay, so I want to kick this off. I'm going to talk about frame rate for a little bit.
Okay.
Because I think this is important. So if you don't know this, most movies are shot in a 24 frame rate. And then sometimes there's adjustments. You'll see like 30 frames or just different scenes, especially in action sequences. You might see different frames, frame rate being shot. And TV, at least older TV, like sitcoms, usually 30 frames a second. Which goes into motion blur and like the TV stuff, which I'm not going to get into, but I have a whole soapbox if you want to know about it.
If anyone really knows
text
Micah,
me.
they know his views on TVs.
So they wanted to film this movie in 48 frames a second, which is, for back then when this was being shot, that's like kind of like, whoa, okay. Because they wanted to create a more realistic look on the world. Now the human eye...
Bad.
The human eye... I'm just setting the table because I don't think... I used to think like 24 frames, that is like wisdom. You have to shoot 24 frames. And I think that that's kind of a... I don't think that you need to do that anymore.
I'm of the opinion, though, when I hear that, it's not... So it's like they want to make it more real. It's a fantasy thing. There is so much... Nope. There is so much fantasy. There's more fantasy in this, I would just say, movie than Lord of the Rings. Because it is much more childlike.
Yes.
So it's much more fantastical. So a part of the reason why you wanted to do the frame rate thing was to make it more realistic, Do you
I think I
know
misspoke when I said the word realistic, because that's
Okay.
not the vibe I got when I watched the behind the scenes.
Okay, good, because that just doesn't make sense. That shouldn't be the mood
Yeah,
you're going
that's not
for.
that's not the impression I got. I used the wrong word. I think they wanted it to be more immersive.
That's different.
That's different.
Yeah.
And they also shot this movie in 3D. So
yeah, and on the red cameras.
Yep, exactly. So
I watch behind the scenes.
on this movie, they shoot with two cameras. One is your left eye, one is your right eye, and then they're shooting them at 48 frames a second. So when you think about it, it's like if they're trying to present like an actual interesting 3D experience, shooting at a higher frame rate makes a lot of sense, because the higher your frame rate goes, the more that window that it looks like you're looking through a movie kind of disappears.
Yeah.
And so the human eye processes 60 frames a second. And then when they first started film, they shot around 12 to 6, or they discovered that if you go below 12 to 16 frames per second, your brain stops processing it as movement and sees it as pictures that are just shuffled together. So then Thomas Edison, he proposed that the best movement that like the eye will really process is 46 frames a second. But studios were like, that's way too expensive to pay for that much film. So they shot a lot of those silent films at 16 to 18 frames.
Okay.
And then projectionists projectioned them at 20 to 24 frames a second. And that's why when you watch like an old Chaplin movie, it looks all choppy and sped up.
Yeah.
Because it's the improper frame rate. So then with the advent of sound, I know I'm going deep, but I hope people like this because I think this is supremely fascinating. With the advent of sound, if you shoot a movie at 10 to 16 frames a second and then project it at 20 to 24 frames, the people talking are going to sound like chipmunks.
Yeah.
So they had to come up on a consensus on a frame rate. So they found the cheapest option to be 24 frames a second. So I just want to dispel the notion that like film has to be that. It's an arbitrary number that people just came up with. I like how it looks, and I still am adjusting to other looks, but that's just how it came about. And so that's the history of frame rate. And there are still people that are trying to crack the frame rate, but there's so much of a bias against it that people tend to be, except for like real crazy film nerds who like want to see film progress and see different things. For example, I forgot the director's name. Ang Lee has two movies that he shot at 120 frames a second. And one of them was Gemini Man, which I saw in theaters at 60 frames a second. And it was so fascinating and a very, very cool movie that's extremely underrated. It kind of takes away the motion blur and really does look like you are watching it right in front of your eyes. Problem with that is you can also see when actors are wearing makeup, and sometimes like acting choices look weird.
Yeah.
Which will come into play when we talk about this movie. But that's what I got on frame rate. Now let's hit some actors, and I'll take a little break from talking.
Okay, is everyone awake? Okay, so I'm just joking. So we have Martin Freeman who plays Bilbo. He was recently in Black Panther. As
we have covered him
Everett
because of Black Panther.
Cool. Next we have it's good that there's two people doing this podcast because it would just be the same people the whole time. Richard Armitage, who plays Thorin Oakenshield. He is also in Into the Storm. He's in Castlevania. That makes a lot of sense. I think he plays the person who I think it is.
Anime show?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
He has such a wonderful voice.
He does.
He's great. His voice is great. He's also in Berlin Station, My Zoe, The Stranger, Ocean's 8, Pilgrimage, Sleepwalker, Brain on Fire, and he's also in Alice Through the Looking Glass. Wait, did we ever watch that movie?
No.
Okay.
That is two sequels, though.
Nice.
Or one sequel. Before you move on from him, I just want to state, as a little teaser for the listener, my biggest problem with the movie is Thorin. And I'll get into why later. I think he is the reason this movie doesn't work.
Okay. Then we have Ken Stott, who plays Balin.
Number 2.
He's in Shallow Grave, Devils, Strike, Come In, movies I've never seen.
So are those like horror movies?
No.
Those sounded like
Some of them
horror thriller
looked like
movies.
thrillers,
Okay.
but no. And then Graham McTavish Dwaylen. He's in Rambo.
Wait, is it Dwaylen Gimli's cousin who is in the tomb in the Fellowship of the Ring? Dwalen's tomb. That's him.
Wow, that's
pretty cool.
That's cool.
I mean, that's just J.R.R. Tolkien.
He's in
That's
Rambo.
not them,
Did you
but-
hear that?
The first movie?
Yeah. He plays Lewis.
Who?
This is what he looks like.
I gotta. I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna look into him.
He's in Preacher, Outlander, Lucifer. Wow, he's a TV guy. He's also in Aquaman. He plays King Atlan. He's also in Castlevania and DuckTales. Wow. William Kircher, who plays Biffer and one of the trolls. He is in Rogue Warrior Robot Fighter. That movie looks so bad. The Axiom. He's in the Skyrim video game, and then that's about it. And then James Nesbitt plays Beaufort. He is in Match Point, Bloody Sunday, Waking Ned Devine, Cold Feet, and The Secret. And then Stephen Hunter plays Bomber. Oh, brother.
Oh, he's in the fourth Rambo. That's yeah.
It just said Rambo on the cover. So, and then Stephen Hunter is in Escape from Pretoria. What's this? Based on the real life prison break of two political captives. Daniel Radcliffe is in it. Jordan's interested. Two Heads Creek, Reef Break, Fresh Eggs. Let's
Fresh
stop.
Eggs.
Let's
What
just
a
do
title.
one more.
Okay.
Dean O. Gorman plays Philly. I recognize this guy. Okay, so he's from Trumbo, One Lane Bridge.
Is he the like really nerdy looking
He's blonde.
dwarf?
What's the nerdy looking one?
Well, I guess I should save my thoughts on the dwarf's looks.
Yeah,
till
well,
later.
that's gonna be a huge topic.
Okay.
The Bad Seed. I think this guy just looks like other people to me. But he's in Trumbo, and I've seen that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so now I'm going to bounce back into the production, but this will be the production of the movie. So in 1995, Jackson tried to make Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, but he had issues and Miramax couldn't get the right for The Hobbit. I think we mentioned that in The Fellowship, but it's good to re-mention. And just another backstory, the novel came out in 1937.
Okay.
In March 2005, Jackson brought a lawsuit against New Line because he believed that he was missing revenue from the merchandise and video games for the Fellowship.
Whoa, that's crazy.
So Robert Shea said in 2007, he was really annoyed and fed up with Jackson, and he's like, we're never working with Jackson again.
Okay.
And then MGM Harry Sloan starts production on movie because he wants Jackson, and after New Line has unsuccessful releases, Shea said he'd be happy to work with Jackson again. So did that make sense? What I just said?
Typical.
Yeah.
I think so.
And then by 2007, Jackson is planning to be an executive producer to a planned 2 Hobbit movies.
If only it were so.
And then in 2008, in 2008, they announced that they're going to do 2 movies that will come out in 2011 and 2012. And then the reason Jackson didn't want to originally direct it is because he's like, I don't want to compete with myself. This needs like fresh blood. It's not.
What a
like,
sad story you're telling.
Well, just hang on. Let's go with it. And then the Tolkien estate sues New Line for not paying them the agreed upon amount and only an upfront for the book rights to
What is New
Lord of
Line's
the Rings.
deal? What's their issue?
I don't know. And then April 2008, Hope Dawns. Guillermo del Toro, director of
Pan's Labyrinth.
The Best Picture a few years ago, Shape of Water, Pacific Rim,
Wait,
Hellboy.
So you don't think he would have done a good job?
I think I have so many notes on here that I think might paint a clearer picture.
Oh, okay.
Because
Because I am without you going forward the second.
Yeah.
I'm into it.
Yeah, 2008. I mean, I think this would be after he made the second Hellboy, so he's like well versed in like the fantasy stuff. and I think he's going on to make Pan's Labyrinth. If I have my Guillermo correct, I could be wrong though. So it makes sense. This is like a good time for him to step in there. And then, but what's funny is in 2006 he was quoting as saying he didn't like dragons, hairy feet, hobbits, swords, or sorcery, and wasn't interested in telling those types of stories.
Guillermo.
So, okay. Then later said he was enthralled by the Hobbit book and enjoyed it more.
And then he finally read the book for the first time.
Well, and he enjoyed it more than the complexities of the Lord of the Rings series.
Sure.
And then production gets delayed, as Jackson says the script won't be finished until 2010. So it gets delayed again. We're sensing a pattern here, I hope.
Yeah.
So here is a Del Toro quote about what would have been. The first film will stand on its own, and the second one will be a transition and fusion with Peter's world. I plan to change and expand the visuals from Peter's, and I know the world can be portrayed in a different way. Different is better for the first one. For the second, I have the responsibility of finding a slow progression and mimicking the style of Peter. So what do you think about that?
Say that last part again?
Different is better for the first one, different style. For the second, I have the responsibility of finding a slow progression and mimicking the style of Peter.
Into it.
Okay.
So specifically with knowing what we have now. It's like, these three movies come out, and I didn't even finish the series.
Yeah.
I've only seen the first two.
This will be the first time Jordan and I see the third movie when we watch it.
So didn't even finish it. And it's like what could have been is how I feel.
I do sense
especially more children's book-ish, a lot more riddles and fun stuff in this book. Dwarves are, I think, naturally a little bit childlike, Goofy-esque.
Well, especially with our understanding of Gimli. There is that to it.
And especially how Jackson chose to portray him in this movie. Mm-hmm. So all of that intertwined, it's like, yeah. I kind of would have liked to see Guillermo del Toro's version of this.
Yes, and apparently his version was going to be much more fairy tale-esque.
Love it.
Okay, so you're on board.
I'm on board.
But then in 2010, Del Toro says, I gotta leave. This thing keeps getting delayed. I can't commit to this anymore.
Well, we need Pan's Labyrinth, so that's fine.
Yes. And then MGM hadn't actually greenlit the movie yet because of financial troubles. And it almost wasn't filmed in New Zealand due to a bunch of union worker laws.
Whoa.
But they were protested by tourism and locals, and that got them in there.
Good.
And then originally the sequel would originally the first movie would have been more, I think, The Hobbit, and then the second movie would have been covering
a Middle Earth story or something.
Covering the gap between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings.
Interesting.
Which I'm not interested in that, but
okay.
And then they scrap the bridging film idea in favor of both being Hobbit movies.
Sure.
And then on the 30th of July, 2012, Jackson says they are doing 3 movies, with the third adaptation, a lot of the material found in the appendixes of Return of the King, which they had recently received the rights to.
Okay.
So if you remember, when at the end of Return of the King, there's 60 pages of notes about Middle-earth.
Okay.
And battles and stuff like that. So that's all of that. Then we'll say a couple more things about the actual movie. Because of the 3D technology and the high frame rate, they had to make the actors more red, all the dwarves and stuff, because they would show up as yellow if they just shot them.
In terms of makeup or lighting?
Makeup.
Oh, okay.
Makeup. So if they just shot them, if they just made the makeup like usual, they would have looked like yellow people.
Like The Simpsons.
Yeah, I guess so. And then, do you know who directed the second unit?
Andy Serkis.
Andy Serkis. And so this is his first directing.
Yeah. Which
now he is doing more directing.
He's Planet of the Apes, bub.
He did not direct any of those, but
he's a big part of them.
Yes. And then that is all I have.
Okay.
So do you have more not hobbits, what are they? The dwarves.
Okay, so then we have Killy, who I would argue is not a dwarf, based on makeup.
Oh, is this the hot guy?
Yeah. He's in the Mortal Instruments, Poldark, Love is Blind.
Wait, Mortal Instruments or Mortal Engines?
Instruments.
Okay. That's a movie?
It's a book series. You never heard of it?
No, it's ringing a bell.
It's a young adult
Okay.
fantasy book series. He's in Loving Vincent, The Secret Scripture. That's about it. And then John Callan plays Owen.
Oh, I think it's Oin.
Okay.
Oin and Gloin.
He is in The Tribe, The Luminaries, The Broken Wood, Touchwood. I've never heard of him either. And then Peter Hamilton plays Gloin, as well as one of the other trolls. So that is Gimli's dad.
Yep.
He's in The Last Tattoo. And he doesn't really have much. Like his IMDb picture is him as a dwarf.
Oh, okay. It's kind of cool.
Jed Brophy plays Nori, who also plays the orc who gets decapitated in the Two Towers, and they say looks like meat's back on the menu, boys.
Oh,
he's that orc.
Cool.
So it's cool. He's now also a dwarf. He's also in District 9. Cool. Great movie. I'm just going to stop there. And then Mark Hadlow plays Dory as well as a third troll. He is in Meet the Feebles, King Kong, the Peter Jackson. Wait.
Oh, so he's already been in 2 of his other movies.
Yeah, the Peter Jackson King Kong.
That's cool.
Mortal Engines.
Okay.
And then we have Adam Brown who plays Ori, spelled like Ori and the Blind Forest. He's the one that looks the nerdiest to me, if that's what you're going for.
Can I see a picture of him? Oh yeah, there's something about his look that I'm like, oh, get him off screen every time I see him in the movie.
Oh, poor Adam Brown.
It's the way
makeup.
It's the makeup and like the way his character looks. It drives me bonkers.
So he is in Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales.
Oh.
He's also in The End of the Effing World 2. Netflix show.
It can only end once, right?
Guess not. Okay, and that's about it. And then we have, again in this movie, well, I'm not going to mention them because they were in The Lord of the Rings. But let's just make sure. Oh, just quickly, Lee Pace, Threnduil, who plays the elf.
Okay.
Guardians of the Galaxy. Oh, I probably have covered him.
About him. Oh, and one thing I do...
Brett McKenzie's also in this movie again as an elf.
Yes.
Oh, well, he doesn't talk. I'll save it for the next movie.
Okay. I do... Oh, yeah. I do want to also mention, you may have been sitting there like, wait a second, but what about Christopher Lee? Last episode, you said that he was like so pissed at Jackson he would not work with him again. They reconciled, and I think part of it was Jackson reaching out and being like, I want Sauron to be in this, and Christopher Lee's like, oh, okay, cool,
yeah,
I'll be in it.
Nice.
Which I
in
think,
the most boring scene of the movie, but great.
Yeah, I have thoughts on that, and it's not his performance, but I think that's an awful scene.
Oh, it's so bad. It's so bad.
I think that's, to me, like when the movie kind of jumps the shark.
Yes.
Like up to that point.
It's still kind of fun.
And I'm like, I don't like some of these choices, but I do kind of get it.
Yeah.
And that's the point where I'm like, oh boy.
I think that if they really felt the need... And if they really felt that greedy that they wanted to make 3 movies, I would have rather they have done an episodic thing. Because if they use a lot of the appendix of Return of the King, that means they... So like, okay, do one Hobbit movie.
Yeah.
The Hobbit. And then there is so many stories of Middle-earth because J.R.R. Tolkien was a visionary. So just if you feel the need to make 2 more movies, just have them be separate things, just like episodic kind of things.
That
you can loosely tie into something, but not carrying in so much weight to each thing.
Right, but also having said that, I think that it's clear that it's been very hard for them to get rights for different things throughout, like all since they've been written. So
then don't make 3 movies.
Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely give you that point, but I just want to lay out up front that watching the behind the scenes of this movie, it seems like everyone's on board, really ecstatic to revisit Middle-earth. So I'm just setting the table, and I get the decisions up to this point. I get the frame rate, I get the 3D. That stuff makes sense to me, even though it's not my favorite thing in the world. But now, let's talk about the movie.
Okay.
So it starts in the Shire, and we see Bilbo, like old Bilbo, and it's the day of his birthday in the Fellowship. I like the tie-in. That's cool. Frodo's in it. That's kind of fun.
But so this movie is almost 3 hours.
Yes.
So I think that a lot of that is feeling a void, feeling the need
Yeah.
to not only make The Hobbit as epic as Lord of the Rings, but make the movies almost as long.
Yeah.
You're working with The Hobbit though, and I don't think that's possible if you want to split them up into 3 movies.
Yeah.
Cut this whole part. I think who wouldn't love seeing Elijah Wood on screen? I love it.
Yeah.
I would watch it every time.
Yeah.
But don't really need it because we don't need him to fill out the world. Because we like the sets are enough, costumes are usually enough, and we already know so much of the lore. We don't need this.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And I had also forgot to mention, I don't know if this is the first scene or it's like in between these scenes, but they show like this whole thing about the dwarves and how they lost their home and they're attacked by...
It's somewhere up in there.
Smaug.
Yeah.
And all of this is like...
So much exposition.
It is, and I see that they're kind of being like, remember, we started the Fellowship with like a bunch of table setting.
Yes.
And so I'm like, oh, okay. I don't think that you necessarily need to have that, but the series has operated in this way before, so it's not bad. I don't think it's bad. And for the record, folks, I think that this movie is a good movie. I will not go farther than that. I will say I think it's a good movie, this first one. But then we'll have more on that.
Okay.
So then I love this next part where it transitions from old Bilbo to Martin Freeman and Gandalf shows up and they do a lot of just the same conversations that are in the book.
Yes.
And I think Martin Freeman is you could not pick a more perfect actor for this role.
Yeah, I think he's great.
He's so good at being on the edge of agitation.
Yeah.
Like no one does agitation like Martin Freeman.
Yeah.
And I think that he's
got a
just
Hobbit look too, so.
Yeah. He's so electric in this movie.
Yeah. Best performance.
Oh, yeah. And I think Ian McKellen's like right back at Gandalf. It's like not a hard transition at all. And I'm thankful that they didn't try to de-age him since they tried to de-age, I think, Christopher Lee and
Elrond. Hugo Weaving.
I don't think he didn't look de-aged to me.
Well, Bilbo. What's that guy's name?
I don't remember his name, but yeah, he's de-aged and you can tell.
Yeah.
But then we have like the dwarves show up. There's this. Do you like this scene? The dwarves showing up and the table and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And they sing the songs.
It's like, classic. Like, what do you? Gandalf knows everything that's going to happen. Yet he neglects to tell Bilbo anything.
Right, which is always fun.
It's fun. So it's also a little stressful, but in a fun way. Yeah. So them showing up is fine. It is like, okay, so they keep showing up and you're really taking stock of what they all look like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about their looks. Kick us off, please.
Well, I just you have to give it to costume and makeup in terms of they do need to spend a lot of time to make sure they all look different so we can all tell them apart.
Totally.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Not that hard, honestly. Like, I think they go too far.
Yeah.
That being said, maybe there are some like dwarves that live in certain areas that I don't know about in Middle Earth that maybe they would look a little bit more like this or not. So I'm operating under, it's just like I'm comparing it to Gimli.
Yes.
Who looks very natural. No one looks natural. No one looks natural at all. And I think part of it,
except for Thorin and Killy, like the two that don't look like
the two that don't have prosthetic noses on their faces. And what's kind of funny about the noses is I like them because they make it funnier.
Yeah.
But because they add a little bit of cartoony childlikeness to it.
Yeah,
but
I think should be in this material.
I agree.
Yes.
Totally.
Okay. Keep going.
But the hair gets out of hand.
Hair is weird. The hair is,
and a lot
choices.
of it is too perfect. It's too well groomed, and I know Gimli is like one dwarf, one character,
right?
But he does in a way he does represent dwarves in that movie, and there was no part of him that told me that he cared about grooming or caring about how he looked.
And maybe it's because we don't have as many characters that are men, like the race of men and elves in this movie. But it seems like the dwarves are also like way taller than Gimli.
I think that's just going to happen because the only person that they have to stand up next to is Gandalf.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how else do you do that? Because Gimli was surrounded by men.
Yeah, so it's probably just a perspective thing, but I wish they were smaller.
I think that because it's hard too because you have so many main characters that are all not as short as hobbits, but definitely not as tall as a man. Like very short, and also they seem very stocky. Like they need to look stocky because Gimli definitely looked very stocky, like lower body weight kind of thing. The only thing that I think they tried to do to achieve that was just thick clothing.
Yeah.
Which didn't really translate for me. Like Thorin has a big belt.
Well, and most of the actors are wearing fat suits, actually.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
But also I had an issue with weapons.
Yes. Oh, this is
maybe one of them had an axe.
Right.
And I hate their swords, how big they were. But at the same time, it's not, I mean, it's like, okay, that, they're dwarves, so they have these kinds of swords. Right. Sure, fine. I don't really like the design. I don't think it looks very good. And I also think I just wish that they didn't use swords because that's what is always used.
Right.
Because they're so different.
I'm fine with the swords, but there's something off about it that I can't put my finger on. But you're close there with me when you say that.
Yeah, I don't know if I can quite figure it out either.
I think also part of it is like, I don't know, like Thorin, I don't really remember him exactly in the books, but I remember him just being kind of like a curmudgeonly guy that doesn't like the Hobbit. I mean, doesn't like Bilbo. But in this, he's like a mix between Aragorn and Boromir, and it's like so clear. And then like Keely's kind of Legolas-y. And then a couple of them they're like all kind of like member of the Fellowship is how they feel a little bit.
I don't get why they didn't give that guy a nose. I get why
which guy?
Killy, but I understand why they didn't give Thorin a nose because he is the quote unquote hot guy of this movie. I kind of get that, like he's main character, he needs to look as relatable to me, to a person that will look up to him as a heroic person.
Yeah.
But
it's a weird choice though.
It is weird.
It's like just I don't know. And so here's what I'll say about their appearances and then we can move on.
Yeah.
Also, and this is kind of like this is chalked up to experimentation, and I'm not going to count this against the movie, but it's shot at 48 frames a second. As I told you earlier, that kind of removes that background layer, makes it look like you're kind of there, and so you can just kind of see that they don't look real like Gimli looked real. Mm-hmm. There's like a barrier.
Maybe
so that
it is maybe the thing that we can't quite explain.
Yeah, and I think that's why they all look a little bit off, is it's like, yeah, I can tell that that's makeup, whereas I couldn't tell it was makeup on Gimli. It was shot at 24 frames a second.
Yeah.
That's part of it. And then, no, that's what I wanted to say. I just think they look kind of weird. And with the motion blur kind of gone, it just looks so different from the other Lord of the Rings movies that it's kind of a tough transition.
I wonder how much less of a issue I would have with the things I've said if it wasn't shot at this frame rate. And they looked exactly the same. I would still have a problem with Killy, but I'm curious.
I know it'd be super fascinating if, I don't know if it's even possible, but if someone could like get the originals and like cut the frames down.
Yeah.
And do it. But I think since they shot it on 3D and stuff, it's probably not even possible.
No, yeah, probably not.
And yeah, okay. So they have the dinner. They explain that they want to go back to their mountain.
And slay Smaug. Or steal the Arkenstone from Smaug.
Arkenstone's kind of cool.
Did they make that up or is that in the book?
That's in the book.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. Yeah.
Just making sure. Just couldn't remember.
And then Bilbo's like, no, I'm not going. And
the reason why Gandalf chose him is because you're small. You would be a good burglar.
Yeah. And just classic hero refusal of the call.
Mm-hmm.
And then he wakes up the next day and he's like, what the heck am I doing? I'm just going to drink tea every day and not do anything? I'm going out. And so he runs out. There's that great shot where he's holding the map and he's running and people are looking at him strange.
Like that. I like
all of that stuff. I like all the Shire stuff.
Yeah.
It feels cohesive with the series.
Uh-huh.
And it feels like the way I felt when I was reading the book.
Uh-huh.
So then he catches up with them.
Did you ever look up the horses?
What do you mean?
Like
if they were, because they have like clumps of extra fur on them.
Yeah,
And
they're shaggy.
They're ponies, first of all.
Right. But I wonder if they're ponies. I don't think
Right.
they are because men are riding them.
Hey, Rebecca.
Let us know.
Can you tell us about the horses they're on? Like what type of ponies they are and all of that information.
If it's not a pony, what did they do to the horses?
Because they have really cool fur that's on them that isn't like a normal horse or pony fur. Rebecca's probably laughing because she probably knows exactly what they are, and she's like, they're so stupid. But please tell us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very curious about that. So then they take off, and then we cut to Radagast, I believe.
Okay.
It doesn't really matter.
No.
Radagast is like 15% too much for me. He's like kind of cool. He's mentioned in like a sentence in the book, so I don't mind them kind of expanding him.
I'm into it. I think he's cool. I wish there was more. I think that if I was a wizard, I would be him.
I like how he's Radagast the Brown. That's fun.
Yes. Love that. I like him. I like him.
I think it's his acting choices are just like.
But think about think about it in this way. Think about it this way.
Okay.
I think they have tried to do these things and then would forget that this is much lighter than Lord of the Rings. Like the story in itself is pretty light. So I think they often forget about that. With Radagast, they remembered that it's a light-ish story.
Yes.
So it's like, oh, he seems fun to explore, to be the zany, crazy, kooky person.
Good point.
So I think if you want to, going for the lightness, and by lightness I mean like not super serious or anything.
Yeah,
I think he's good.
That's a really good point. I agree with you.
Yeah.
That is
the whole how he enters the story in terms of like discovering,
the necromancer
thing. Boo.
It's a little odd, and
it's so dumb.
Okay, there's so much here. First of all, I think this movie just doesn't understand if it wants to be light or heavy. And that's a big problem I have with it because I think up to this point, it's been light, except for like the quote unquote cool action sequence at the beginning explaining the dwarves.
Yeah.
But it's been light and fun and whimsical. And I think my problems I have with it, besides the Thorin issue, which we'll get into, is I just think that they do something like really intense and quote unquote cool, and to me it like disrupts from the fact that it's lighthearted. I don't know. It's
Plus, like don't give me a Sauron character. This isn't Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
So don't give me. I mean, it's like Fantastic Beasts giving us Johnny Depp. We don't need a guy who you're claiming is as important as Voldemort.
Right.
We don't need it because Lord of the Rings was the Harry Potter of the world.
It was the event of the third age of
so
Middle-earth.
don't give me some like another really powerful wizard thing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that, I remember reading that, I think it was Jackson was like, you read The Hobbit and Gandalf just disappears and you don't know why. And then at the end of the book, he's like, yeah, we had to fight this necromancer with Radagast the Brown. And you don't really know about it. And he's like, it'd be fun to expand upon that. And I do get that inclination.
Me too. That makes sense.
But I also think that's kind of like, it's like, I wonder if the internet was as active as it is about plot holes and things like that, if even anyone would even think to care about explaining
You're
that.
making two different movies. Because I know that in Lord of the Rings, there are so many different storylines, and they successfully pace it and edit it and write it.
And they all serve this purpose.
It all serves the purpose. And there are several storylines again as well.
Uh-huh.
But I don't care
right
about all of them. I only care about the main quest, which is never good if you care more, if you don't care about one. I have a question that I forgot to ask.
Okay.
I haven't watched the special features. I've only watched them once. But
this movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember, I don't know, maybe it wasn't the special features. But I remember hearing that they had significantly less amount of time to work on these movies than Lord of the Rings.
Yes. That is in a documentary that's on Battle of the Five Armies that I'm still trying to track down.
Isn't there an interview with Peter Jackson and he just looks like he doesn't give an F anymore?
I want to save that for when I find it because everything I found for this movie and like they did like video blogs for this movie, he's like into it.
Okay.
So I want to cross that bridge when we come to it, because it looked like he was on sets that were not in this movie. So I think as the production goes along, it's that's when it weighs on him.
Okay.
And also, there is a literal quote in one of the vlogs where, first of all, they have the New Zealand people, like from like the like natives.
The Maori, I can't pronounce it.
Yeah, like they bless like the production, and it's before they even start. So there's like this whole ceremony that they do, and the whole cast and production is there.
Yeah.
And they like bless the production of the film, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
And is like it's just cool that they were like, we're using your land and we want your blessing, which I think is really fantastic. All of that to say, he has a quote in that where he says, if the producer asked me if I wanted more pre-production, I would say no, because I'm just ready to start this thing. And I want to get it started today, because one more day of pre-production is a waste of my time right now. That sort of a thing. So anyway.
Leads me to another theory that I will not talk about, but okay.
So this is a real honest question I have for you. You are a writer. You understand stories very well. I know we discussed that they wanted to expand upon Gandalf. Okay, I get that. What do you think the purpose narratively is of them like mysteriously doling out that it's Sauron? Because I think pretty immediately, as a viewer, you've already seen the outcome. You're just like, oh, cool, that's Sauron. Okay. So like that.
Storytelling wise, I think they're just dangling the carrot in front of your face.
Okay. Because it just feels totally, like, I think of Star Wars. Right off the bat, he introduces Anakin Skywalker, and it's like, this is Darth Vader. So the whole time
it's so ominous.
You're like, oh, that's Darth Vader. I need to watch for that. He doesn't try to pretend that it's like, who's this kid going to be? His last name's Skywalker, but don't pay attention to that. Like, he doesn't try to hide the fact.
No, and in Harry Potter, when we finally get to some Tom Riddle stuff, well, I'm going to specifically talk about in Half-Blood Prince when they go to the memory. Dumbledore shows Harry the memory of Tom Riddle asking Slughorn about Horcruxes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
I think it might be the same movie that we also see him as a child at the orphanage. Because Dumbledore starts sharing information, and it's so cool and ominous, like we're talking about, because we know who he becomes, because we have seen the Goblet of Fire. Like we've seen him born again. Yeah. And like knowing that it's him makes it so much cooler than as if maybe Harry just stumbled upon the pensieve and like, oh, what's this memory? Oh, who's this kid? And at the end of the movie, we find out it's Voldemort or something. Yeah. I just don't think it's, I don't know. I just don't find that as compelling. And I think in this story line that they made up, I think it's just trying to fill out runtime.
Yeah, because the whole scene where they have the counselor with Galadriel, Elrond, Gandalf, and Sauron, there is zero tension for me because I already know that they're talking about Sauron. And maybe there's another way for them to just be like, Sauron's returning, let's plan it. Maybe there'd be more tension there, but for them to be like, I don't know what this evil is. You're sitting there and you're like, yeah, I know you guys don't know, the most smart people in the world, but we already saw what happens next. So can we skip this scene? Because it's kind of boring.
Yeah, it would almost be cooler or more interesting if, let's just imagine a world where Sauron doesn't exist yet.
Okay.
Like this story takes place so far in advance or in the past that we don't even, like, they don't know who he is. But because we have seen Lord of the Rings, we know about that character. Yeah. But since this is in the middle of everything, pretty much, it's like, oh, we know that he does come back. We know who he was before. It's like this middle of the road thing, not like a beginning, like an origin kind of thing. It's like origin part 2. Right. He's back again. Right. It's just not as interesting. It almost would be more interesting if, like, I don't know, like, okay, so Saruman's technically good now. Yeah. Or like he's good, period, because he has, it's not Lord of the Rings yet. Right. What if we dove a little bit more into his, like, being corrupted? Yeah. I don't think that's the right call. But
that's more compelling already.
It would be more compelling because we at least know that he wasn't always bad. Like, but he was corrupted.
Well, and that whole scene, another big problem I have with it is he's just like sitting there and he's like, oh, Gandalf, you're stupid for even imagining that evil could even exist in this world. I'm not trying to save face.
I know, it's so obvious.
He's sitting there and he's like, don't trust me. I'm not a bad guy. No, come on. I'm not a bad guy. Sauron coming back? I don't even remember that name. And you're like, okay, you're a wizard too. Like, try to be tricky at all. Like, anyone would walk away and be like, okay, Sauron's bad.
Galadriel's there. She knows she knows all.
Like, Saruman's like a bad guy, right? That's the next meeting. Like, they walk into the other room and they're like, we should like detain him and figure out what's wrong.
Let's just kill him right now, right?
Yeah. But then we're supposed to believe that in the Fellowship, Gandalf seeks his counsel.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I'm sure he's probably in the rest of the series, which doesn't make a lot of sense.
I think it's just it's doing the things that you shouldn't be doing and doing all the callbacks.
Yeah.
Which it's like, Peter Jackson, you said that you were worried about comparing this to Lord of the Rings or whatever he said. And it's like, that's exactly what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
Because you're forcing me to.
Yeah.
Because this is the Lord of the Rings storyline. And what's, I think, so cool about The Hobbit is that is just when Bilbo gets the ring.
Yeah.
Period. In a way, because it's really the dwarves' story. Mm-hmm. That's what's interesting. To me, that's like why I think it's interesting in relation to Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they go on this really great quest and defeat a dragon, and Bilbo happens to pick up the ring.
Yeah.
I find that interesting.
That's the fun of it. And, and that's like the connection to the next part in the series.
Yes.
It's not this like huge conspiracy, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
It's not that interesting to me.
Right.
So let's talk about something else that we have a huge problem with. And that is Thorin's dad is killed by this pale orc.
Oh.
The pale orc looks a little weird.
Yeah.
Most of the orcs look a little weird. See my earlier thought about the 48 frames per second and costumes.
Yes.
Secondly, imagine the animators, instead of animating 24 frames a second, they are now animated 48 frames a second. So they are literally doing double for everything. That's why some of the CG looks weird.
Yeah.
So he fights him with his oak shield, which is kind of like, if I remember right, that's like his grandfather's storyline as he fights this Azog orc, and that's how he gets the family name of Oakenshield.
Okay.
So it kind of doesn't make sense that Thorin
is Thorin Oakenshield?
Just happens to grab an oak shield. I don't know. It's like,
I was just lying there.
No, but it's weird. Like, his name is that, and he happened to grab oak.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, whatever.
And so this leads me to the Thorin problem.
Yeah.
And I think I'm probably going to talk about this all three movies. They attempt to make Thorin the main character of a movie called The Hobbit.
Yeah.
First of all, you have Martin Freeman, who's one of our finest working actors. We love Freeman. This guy, I'm sure he's a fine actor. I'm sure he's a good guy. I think this performance is so one-sided, undynamic, and boring. Thorin has no personality.
No.
I defy you to tell me anything about him except for vengeance.
Yeah.
That's it. He's so uninteresting. Every time he talks, I'm like, oh, shut up.
Yeah.
He's my least favorite dwarf, and I wish he wasn't in the movie.
And he's because the elves didn't help them that one time. So he is distrustful of elves. I get that. They cover stuff like that in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
That's part of it. Mm-hmm. But it's also like Theoden didn't want to work with Gondor because they didn't aid them. But once Gondor gave him the call, he answered.
Yeah.
That's a good character. That's a leader. So this is Thorin, the leader. And this quest is so important to him. He still refuses to seek the Elvish counsel. It takes Gandalf forcing them to go to Rivendell. Which
I think is in the book, but I think the way it's just played and written is because he has no personality. It's not. It's just very uncompelling to me.
Yeah.
And I remember in the next movie, if I remember correctly, Bilbo gets split up from the group, and they just spend so much time with Thorin, and I think Bilbo gets 45 minutes to an hour of screen time in a 2.5 hour movie, and you're like, I wanted to see The Hobbit, not the dwarf.
Yeah.
That's why I paid money to see. And so, yeah, and every time he does something like intense and epic, it just feels like a really pale imitation of Aragorn.
Yeah.
To me.
Yep.
And so, yeah, and I think the orc storyline is pretty boring.
Yeah.
And even though I don't...
It's just another part. It's another storyline in this big epic tale that shouldn't be this big and epic that I don't really care about.
They could have just had, if they were going to put him in it, just have him killed at the end of this movie. So
Yes.
Thorin's arc of like, I did it, whatever, let's keep moving on. Instead
Absolutely.
of like, oh, he survived. Now he's going to be in the next movie. And if I remember right, he does not die in the next movie.
I don't remember
So
him dying.
Azog is in the third movie.
Yeah. I will say though, some of the motion capture on Azog is pretty good.
Yeah.
They do a really good job of capturing certain mannerisms and body language that if they didn't use motion capture, they would not have gotten.
I almost think the CG creatures look better than the makeup creatures because of the whole frames per second thing.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because the orcs are like, oh, whoops,
Oh, yeah. It's
that looks a little weird.
But the goblins are cool. I'm into the goblins.
Yeah, the goblins kind of remind me of the goblins at Gringotts a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Especially the little guy who flies up that line.
That guy reminds me of Mad Max. Thunderdome.
Oh yeah,
Thunderdome?
yeah.
Okay.
Trooper? No, what is his name?
I don't remember.
Because it's one of them's the big guy and he's the guy on his back.
Yeah.
And they have like a name that is... Anyway, listen to our Mad Max Thunderdome episode that came out a year and a half ago to check that out.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Who covers Mad Max that early in a podcast's life?
We do, because we wanted to establish that we weren't just doing only the new series. Okay?
Okay.
So, there's the troll scene, the out of the fire into the frying pan chapter of the book. I think the scene's decent. It's not like the best.
It's a long scene.
It's a long scene, and then they do try and make it epic with the dwarves like fighting them and the music like really swelling. And I just kind of think I wish that it was a little different. Also, I forgot to mention at the top of the podcast, this is like the same production team as the previous movie.
Oh, okay.
Same cinematographer, music, director. There might be another producer and maybe another writer, but I don't believe there is.
Okay.
I just realized I haven't talked about that at all. So they do that. They get to Rivendell. Elrond's there. It's cool to see Elrond.
Yeah.
And then they set off again. And is this when they get to... Yes. Yeah. Okay. So this is when they're climbing on that mountain and the rocks are fighting.
Okay.
Okay. First of all, big, huge, mountain-sized rock people fighting. Yeah.
Give me that.
Give me that. I like
During
that.
a thunderstorm? Give me more of that.
Yeah. That equals good. But here is one of the main problems of this series. The book is very observatory. And this is a good example of that. They look at the rock monsters and see them from afar, and they're like, whoa, look at those rock monsters. That's cool. And then they just go about their merry way. And sometimes they get into trouble, like the troll. But instead, this rock scene, they're in the rock scene, and they're having to fight for their lives.
I don't really care that much, actually.
I just think...
That doesn't make for good TV if they just watch it happen, I think.
See, I would argue not... Because you have scenes in, like, the Two Towers, like Sam is just looking at the Oliphant, and you're like, that's cool. And, of course, a body falls in front of him. But there's so much in Lord of the Rings where they just look. They look up at those huge statues at the Fall of Rhoros.
Oh, that's true.
And you're like, that's amazing.
Just rounding out the world.
Yeah, and I think just like a quick sweep where you see these crazy rocks fighting for a little bit, and they make a few comments, and Bilbo says, I'm tired of going home, I want to go home, but that's pretty amazing. And then they go into the mines.
Sure.
That would be a lot more fun to me, especially because anytime people are hanging off of stuff, it almost always like doesn't work for me.
Because you know they're not going to fall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we talked about Mount Doom last week, but there's a genuine tension there. It's the end of the series. Something could happen. But the first movie in a planned 3-part trilogy of Hobbits, it's like, we're in the middle of the movie.
Sure. Let Bilbo fall. See if I care. That's how I feel.
It's like, no. But rock giants are good.
Yes.
Um,
So from there, they go down to the mines of goblins, and they pretty much get captured immediately, overwhelmed by them. I actually thought that I might hate this part in terms of like the goblins.
yeah,
They're cool, into it.
they are cool.
And I think I like, yeah, they're cool. I like it.
I think when they fight, and this is always the temptation when you do CG characters, is you can do weirder things that don't obey the laws of physics.
Yeah.
And it's so striking when you look at this fight scene and then go to like any of the fight scenes in Lord of the Rings, because they're very based on reality.
Yeah.
And I know we're talking fantasy. I'm just saying that like when I watch the fight scenes in these movies, I get bored pretty quick.
Me too.
Because there's not like real impact. I don't feel it. And also they're just too long. All the fight scenes are like 5 minutes too long at least.
I think if they truly committed to the childlike tone of the story,
Yeah.
they could have done the scene.
Yes.
And we would be less annoyed with it.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. Okay, so while this whole goblin thing's going on, but Bilbo gets away, but he falls down the cave mines.
Yeah.
And with a goblin, wakes up.
I will say the goblin that's fainted looks insane. It is like freaky looking.
Yeah.
Because that one's like a real
That's
one
real.
sitting there. And it's like, I think because it's not moving, it's
I know,
a
that
little
one's
disturbing.
scary. So we meet Gollum.
Gollum, yes. And this is like so anticipated.
Yeah,
Everybody
this is
knows
like the best part of the movie for me.
This is easily the best part of the movie.
So Gollum takes the goblin, kills it, and he is going to eat it. But before he begins that process, he discovers there is someone else down in the mines, Bilbo. When Gollum was dragging the goblin away, he dropped the ring.
Yeah.
So Bilbo picked it up. And thus begins Gollum telling Bilbo, like, there is a way out, but let's play a game, and if you lose, I get to eat you.
Yeah.
Also, probably my favorite part of the book.
Oh, yeah.
Too.
It's
just
so great.
It's like, imagine this. Like, this is a hobbit ripped out of the Shire on a crazy adventure that he never thought he would be on with dwarves, no less.
Yeah.
And they get into a hairy situation, and he gets separated from all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And he meets a weird creature down in a cave.
Mm-hmm.
That is like fantasy 101. Do it.
Yeah.
Love it. So they pass back and forth some riddles.
Which is just, see, that's like whimsical and fun. And
Yes.
And it also, that is when they perfectly blend the dark tone and
Yes.
the whimsical tone. Because they're doing riddles, whimsical, but it's kind of shot a little freaky. And Gollum's always a little freaky. And if they had kept that tone the whole movie, because you're also laughing at Gollum. Like,
Yeah.
he does stuff that's funny.
Yeah. Yeah, the
I just
acting's
wish
great.
that tone would have been throughout the whole movie.
Yeah, me too. Would have been cool. Would have been cool. So the acting's really good. The effects are obviously really good with him too. They definitely spent time on him.
Yeah. I think I just kind of prefer the Gollum of the trilogy just because of nostalgia.
Yeah.
But he is more detailed in this movie. And he does, like, I think on a technical level, look better.
Yeah, but it is kind of interesting watching this after having watched Lord of the Rings so closely and be like, man, Lord of the Rings makes that Gollum look better.
Yeah,
because
like they did it
he
so
still
good.
looked so good. He still looks so good to this day.
Absolutely.
So Bilbo. Okay, so the riddle playing escalates, and the Gollum realizes he lost the ring. Then Bilbo puts it on and he disappears, but it's as if he doesn't really know what's going on.
Well, let's talk about the disappearing.
Okay.
Because it's very weird.
Yeah.
In the Fellowship, we remember the first time Frodo puts on the ring, he trips and it kind of like is drawn to his finger and falls on it. Now,
and we're just all asking for this visual again because we
it's
loved
just
it
weird
so much.
because he does the same thing Frodo did, but it's also weird because the ring is in slow motion, but his hands are moving at regular motion. And then he reaches up just like Frodo, and it's kind of like...
Oh, it's so dumb.
I wish he was just fidgeting with it, and he accidentally put it on, and then he's like, wait, what the heck?
Yep.
But the cool thing about it, though, is they did do a really good job of it reminds you of the world that Frodo sees when he's in it, but since Sauron's not around yet, it's not
it's
evil.
Subdued. It's much more not intense.
Yeah, which I think they did that really well.
Nice touch.
And then the scene where he's about to kill Gollum,
Oh my god.
That is like really, they do that so well.
Nail the expression on Gollum's face.
Yes.
So yeah, because I see that, and just like we've talked about in Lord of the Rings, there are so many times. Most like when I was a kid, it was like, just kill Gollum already. He's bad.
Yeah.
He's gonna hurt you guys. He's gonna kill you guys, and he's gonna ruin the whole thing in Middle Earth is gonna be destroyed because of him. But then every once in a while they throw in this look or this line, and it's like, no, give him a second chance. I pity him, which is exactly what Gandalf told Frodo in the Fellowship. Why do you think Bilbo didn't kill him?
Was it pity that stayed his
hand?
hand?
Was it pity?
And if you you music connoisseurs out there, so if Sean Muir's listening, I'm sure he recognized this. Howard Shore reprises the theme that plays when Gandalf tells Frodo, talks about Gollum and pity staying his hand, and it comes back in, and that's like almost a goosebump moment in the movie.
Yes,
they nail that moment. It's
really good,
awesome.
Yeah. But then the dwarves are running out of the mine, the cave thing, and Bilbo runs out too. Still has the ring on. But, you know, Thorin's talking crap about Bilbo, about, oh, he probably ran home. And then he pops out of a tree and he's like, no, I'm here. Yeah. And Thorin's like, I still hate you.
No, but he's like, I said that you were this and you were that. And he goes, I've never been more wrong.
Yeah. But then later on, he's even more like, I love you, because he saves his life.
Yeah. And Bilbo's like, oh yeah, I got the scenes mixed up. But Bilbo says like, I came back because I have a home to go back to and you don't. And I like that they tried to make that connection. Mm-hmm. I do kind of like that. That's kind of cool. There's a scene where the wargs attack them and they run up the trees. And in the book, it's just a quick little scene. So the wargs are the
same as the other.
They look so different. Okay, and they look
just making
not
sure
as
that
good.
They're not different animals.
They say wargs in the Hobbit.
Okay,
yeah. But they don't look like
they
wargs.
Look so different. I like in the Lord of the Rings, the design reminds me of hyenas a little bit.
Like mangy hyenas.
Like mangy and obviously like pretty different looking hyenas. Yeah. But essence of hyena.
Yeah.
And this is just a wolf with a really big mouth.
Yeah. So, yeah, and then they're in the pine cone, the tree, and they drop it off, and then the eagles get them, and the scene's too long.
We realize
and they do
that
like a big battle.
It is possible to do a domino effect with trees.
Yep, we do realize that, unfortunately. And then is that when the movie ends?
You particularly liked, and I agree with you, the eagles looked exquisite.
The eagles look amazing. And I remember watching it in 3D being like, it really popped on that. Because, you know, the 3D also enhances the colors. So, you know, that scene was like, whoa.
I wonder if it's true with animation. I find that when I'm drawing, for me, I enjoy doing birds more than any other animal. And reptiles are more fun because fur is so hard to do.
Oh, yeah.
And like, I wonder, because Smaug looks so good too.
Yeah.
And he's a reptile. And I wonder if it's easier / more enjoyable for an animator as well.
Yeah. That's interesting. It probably, because remember how hard it was for them to crack Monsters, Inc. with Mike's, or with Sully's hair?
True.
Anyway, so that's pretty much the movie. It ends on Smaug's eye opening, which I never liked those type of endings. It felt like a Marvel post-credit scene, like cutting to that.
It reminds me for some reason of the movie Aragon, and I've never read the books.
Yeah.
But apparently, it's famously the first movie they did so terribly that they couldn't make more.
Yeah,
they like ruined.
It's not the first movie to do that. It's just no.
Just this franchise that didn't become a franchise is apparently because they butchered the first book so bad.
Yeah,
but I remember that movie ending with a similar if I can remember right, like a dragon that you've never seen yet, and it looks, I think, formidable.
Yeah,
and it's like, oh, I wonder what that is, and then you never see.
Yeah. I know. The cliffhanger endings are tough and usually not good. But he does look incredible, though.
Yes.
He looks so good. But that's The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey. Talk about an unexpected podcast. Wow.
Gandalf did say at the beginning of the movie when he was talking to Bilbo about his uncle, and Bilbo said, I'm pretty sure that story's not true, or you're making that up. And Gandalf says, well, every good story deserves embellishments. Couldn't be farther from the truth of this story.
Yeah.
Apparently, if that's what we're operating under.
Yeah. So we hope you enjoyed the episode. Do you have anything else you want to?
No.
I think we covered it pretty thoroughly. Next week is The Hobbit, Desolation of Smaug. I've already talked about the Patreon. There's going to be, I have like a music video and a Little Women video. I know in the last episode I talked about them. I'm not entirely certain when they're coming out, so just follow me on Instagram @OutOfMicah, because I'm not sure when those are coming, just because of the state of everything going on. And speaking of, we put a link in our bio for a petition, The Color of Change. Sign a petition to end violent policing against Black people, and we fully support that.
So all you do is you click on it, and you sign it, and you press done or something. Like it's that easy.
Yeah, it's super easy, and you can read it too. And it's really short. It's just
you should read it.
Yeah. So definitely check that out and sign it, please. Please sign it. And thanks for listening. I believe next Wednesday is our Patreon exclusive Finding Dory, and then next Friday is Hobbit: Desolation of Smaug. Thanks for listening. And I don't look forward to watching the next movie. Bye.
Bye.
And then the Goblin King is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
I like how his voice is a little bit higher pitched
Oh,
at certain
look up
points.
Who he was.
Oh, yeah. I'll keep talking about him while you do it. But, like every bad guy in every movie's like, hello, I'm the bad guy. And it's cool that he's like, what are you doing in here?
Yeah, he's got a good voice. I feel like I recognize it. The guy who plays Bruce in Finding Nemo is not Bruce Spence.
Well, who is it?
Barry Humphries.
Uh-oh.
Can you double check?
Yes, okay.
But it says Bruce.
Okay, talk to me. Talk to me, though.
Barry Humphries plays the Great Goblin. And it says Finding Nemo, Bruce. So that's all. The only thing I see.
Oh, he's Chum. Bruce Spence is Chum. Who's the?
with another shark.
He's another shark. Yeah.
Okay. Good. I'm glad we got that squared away. Okay, yeah. So that guy plays Bruce.
Okay.
He's got a great voice. I love it.
Yeah, he does.
So
I can like see it and hear them both now.
Too.
Yeah, that's
probably
very cool.
why, especially, I had a reaction to it when we were watching it.
Yeah,
like I like that voice. I heard this voice recently.
Yeah.